Well, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, and all that stuff. It is Thursday, the 7th of March, 2024. This is Paul English Live. Welcome to the show. A slightly different beginning there this evening. I thought I'd better reduce the length of the music track. It goes on quite a while otherwise. Welcome to the show. We're here for the next couple of hours here on WBN 324. And we're also going out on various other networks. I'll fill you in as we go through. We're here every Thursday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. for listeners on the US Eastern time zones. And of course, I think they're all going to get jumbled up pretty much at the end of this month because we've got the wonderful scenario of the clocks to deal with, which is always lots of fun, isn't it? Not only do they change the clocks, which is incredibly irritating, of course, but also we do it at different times just to add more fun. So I think in America, you probably do it way earlier than we do, which means that we're kind of all even more disjointed than we usually are when we're doing this sort of thing. Coming up in a few minutes' time, my guests for this evening, a little story in that really. It was supposed to be guest, but the whole situation has got entirely out of hand, which is really rather marvellous. And I'm going to be joined in a few moments' time by Monica Schaeffer. She returned. She was here about 3 months ago when we had a fantastic discussion about the myth of German villainy, the book by Benton Bradbury. If you haven't heard that one, it's a cracking show. And she's joined by her brother, Alfred. I'll be bringing them up in a few moments' time. But there was a little article. I don't normally do so much sort of news on COVID, although it's a news story that will not end, and for that reason, because it's covered excessively all over the place and is highly relevant, of course, I don't want you to think I'm ignoring it because I'm stupid, although, of course, from time to time it can be a bit silly. But I came across this post from a gentleman called Jim Ferguson on Twitter. Now, Jim Ferguson's little profile says that he's a former parliamentary candidate with the Brexit Party, Barnsley. Barnsley's up in Yorkshire. I always speak like that when I say Yorkshire. So not a million miles from where I grew up. And he's a businessman and an entrepreneur. He's a founder of Freedom Train International. And I just wanted to read out this. It's a reasonably lengthy tweet, but it's a couple of paragraphs. And it's just to clue us in on this aspect of things. He says, England's vaccinated population had close to 1 million deaths in 23 months. The unvaccinated population had less than 61,000 deaths over the same period. Shocking data, he said, released by the UK government shows that over the past 2 years, the vaccinated population in England has suffered an outrageous number of deaths compared to the unvaccinated population, even though approximately 30% of the population has not even had a single dose of the Wuhan, coronavirus COVID-19 vaccine, or whatever it was. And a little bit more data here, he says. According to the UK Health Security Agency, yes, I feel very secure that they exist, by July 2022, 18.9 million people had refused, I was one of those, I hope you were too, the first dose of the COVID-19 injection. 21.5 million people had refused the second dose. 2.6 million people who had received the first dose but refused the second, and 30.4 million people had refused the third dose, alongside 8.9 million, you'd have to remember this, there won't be a test, alongside 8.9 million people who who had received the second dose but refused the third. It's a bit confusing, that, isn't it? So 63.4 million people were eligible in the UK for vaccination at that point. Therefore, as of July 2022, 30% of England's population remained vaccinated. Hurrah! 34% was not double vaxxed. 50% was not triple vaxxed. However, the vaccinated population as a whole accounted for 95% of all COVID-19 deaths. Let me repeat that. The vaccinated population as a whole accounted for 95% of all COVID-19 deaths between January and May 2023, while the unvaccinated population accounted for just 5%. So this huge, enormous, vicious, hideous event, which, of course, they've kept out of the news considerably. They've played it down, certainly over the last year or so. They've not been talking about it much, is now wreaking a terrible toll on people. And there's even worse stuff than that. If you listen and tune into Jeff Rents, he has regular reports on this from time to time, and they make for very grim listening and grim reading. There's no two ways about it. I think there's the loss of children for pregnant women here in the UK who have been vaxxed is also extremely high. I don't have the numbers to hand, but we will drop this sort of news in from time to time as we go through. So this was just to let you know how awful it really is. It's really awful. And we're not going to find out from the mainstream media. And I guess for a great reason, that's why you're here on shows like this and elsewhere. So there you go. It's looking bad. Probably, unfortunately, maybe the worst is still to come. Those of you that would be familiar with the Deagle website from years ago, and I've been following it along with others for over a decade, I think, DEAGEL, they had some horrific figures of the decimation of the European population and North American population beginning around about 2025. So their plans are long-standing, and it clues us into, really a bigger agenda, as we all know. Okay, so that aside, the backstory to today is I contacted Monica Schaeffer, as I mentioned earlier in the intro here, to bring her onto the show, and she informed me that her brother was now available to join us, and I've been speaking to both of them on and off over the past day as we've set this up. So I'd like to bring them onto the show now. We'll bring Monica on first because it's important. And Monica, are you here in the studio and ready to unleash your tonsils?
I am, and thank you very much, Paul, for having me back on. I was delighted to read your message a few days ago with the invitation to join you, and that was an excellent introduction to the show, because this thing, they almost have made it go away by just not talking about it in the mainstream media. So we are being gaslighted to the extreme about it, because it's almost like, oh no, nothing happened, nothing to see here. So I am really glad that you brought that story as an introduction. And I know that we'll talk, I'd like to talk about some of these blots of toner, what they call laws popping up, like by the day, because that's something that you mentioned a few days ago when you first contacted me, some of the things you're hearing. I am really glad that you brought that story as an introduction. I've got an echo happening here, my own voice coming back a few seconds. Okay, so is it all
it's
good
all gone
again?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Good.
I just to let you know, my stamp as a radio guy is that I always have to introduce some echo at some point, otherwise the listeners wouldn't be used to it all being completely fluff free. So it's actually become my signature that at some point echo will appear in the broadcast, and I will go.
An echo that a minute old echo, like.
Oh yeah. It's to make it more fun, and so that I brought you on basically to confuse you a little bit to see how we all cope with it.
I thought it was my twin sister or something.
No.
Anyway, so we'll probably talk about some of those laws popping up in combination with the level of indoctrination and guilt that they've put onto especially the Caucasian people, the European peoples, the white race. So that's just backdrop. But before I say anything more, why don't we bring Alfred in? And yes, Alfred was released February 20th after 6 months in in a little cell again. And that one, he can tell the story if he likes about why he was there. It was, quite a ridiculous little thing that they put him back in the gulag.
Well,
Okay, so there, Alfred.
Yes, yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is Alfred Schaeffer now. Yeah, I'm just out of prison for several weeks after my second stint in prison, which was only for 6 months. And yeah, Monica was saying I should say what I was in prison for. Yeah. I was in prison for something I had done while I was in prison for the 4-year stint. I spent a year and a half actually in that 4-year stint in isolation mode because of this pandemic COVID nonsense. And I was in the courtyard with an Afghani and an Albanian guy, and it was just after I had been put into isolation mode. So there was just the three of us. They were also in isolation mode, and so we'd had this sort of a separate courtyard. The 60 minutes of fresh air that were allowed every day. We were separated from the the other prisoners, kind of thing. And I explained to them why I was in isolation mode. It's because of this mask nonsense. Says they were making an ass of me, and I'd sort of make an ass back. They always say I'm supposed to put my mask over the nose, raise my mask so it covers my nose, and I'd put it on my forehead, and I say, "Is this high enough?" And then I'd ask them if they want me to stick my finger up my butt as well. It's just a total nonsense, this mask stuff. Anyway, that's why I was in my isolation mode, and then I said why I was even in prison, and I said it was because of my dog. Now, my dog is a jumping dog, and he's never even crapped on the sidewalk or anything, but I showed them how high my dog likes to jump, and this guard saw that, and he says, Schaeffer, that's a Nazi salute, And then the Albanian guy, he was really quick, and he says, he's just showing us how high his dog jumps. Anyway, this guard...
Yeah, I'm aware of your spectacular physical demonstrations of that, Alfred. They're quite a thing.
And then... I was going to say, and then the guard thought he was going to get some extra points because, most guards, they would never have reported that. But this guard, he was kind of a feeble-minded, not very... sort of a inferiority complex guard. So he thought he could get some bonus points if he reported that. And he did report that. And then they made, and then after I was released from prison, they brought that case up and threw me, had a court. I went to court for it, and they gave me the 6 months. But I have to fly over the details now. But there's other things that happened, and a lot of things that happened. Like, first of all, when I was in Lundspec in that prison.
Before you do that, Alfred, because this is fantastic, but I want to clue a huge chunk of the listeners into your kind of backstory, because I know a lot of people that are listening or in certain pockets will be familiar with it, but a lot won't. So you have been spending an inordinate amount of time, unfortunately, regrettably, or whatever words you want to use, at the pleasure of the German authorities. And this is for initial things that you did a few years ago, which they took umbrage to. And then you found yourself back in again. Because when I spoke to Monica the other day, although I was aware, I wasn't aware, and this was part of my introduction, that you were, as I've put on the notes here, had been released back into the wild with the rest of us. And this happened quite recently, didn't it? February the 20th, was it?
That I was released, yes.
Yes. And so if you want to just imagine you're talking to somebody who doesn't even know you, just a little bit of the backstory to why you're here on the show talking like this about these things. That would be useful, I think.
Yeah, Monica and I were charged a number of years ago in 2018. We were charged. We did some videos and so forth, explaining things to people to wake them up.
Yes.
And they put us both on trial together. And Monica had already been in prison for 6 months before the trial started. And I was still free back then. But then the trial took like 4 months. And at the end of the 4 months of trials, she was released with 10 months, because that was then 10 months for her. And I got 4 years. So I did that 4-year stint. And during that 4 years, this corona pandemic was unleashed on humankind. And I was I was at the right place at the right time. Namely, I was already in prison, so they couldn't arrest me for my resistance to this nonsense. And I took full advantage of that. And when they made an ass of us or a fool of us by telling us we have to put a mask on to do this or do that, and sit apart from the other people when we're eating and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I played it like if you were a kid in high school or something, and the teacher and the principal of the school tells you you've got to put your thumb up your ass or something. I mean, no one's going to do it. And this is what this was for me. It was like, these people, do they think that we're that infantile, that obedient, that stupid, that we're going to do it? Well, unfortunately, we have been demoralized after decades of demoralization to the point where hordes of people actually obeyed this nonsense, and hordes of people rolled up their sleeve and took in this bioweapon. It's a little bit like if they came to you and says, inhale this bag of asbestos dust. Now, no one's going to die right away, but very, very many people will be suffering from inhaling the asbestos dust over as time goes by, and it'll affect different people in different ways. And that's the predicament that we are now faced with. People who did succumb to this are going to be waking up to the fact, and they will be having nightmares when they realize what's been done to them. Okay.
Yes.
But now I've sort of gone a little bit more off track.
No, you haven't, because okay. I think it's, I mean, you're addressing, I mean, a theme that's through everything, probably everybody that's communicating at the moment, is this condition of demoralization which has taken place. And, it's because there are all sorts of reasons. It's a long conversation, and this is a part of it, looking at these things. But we have a situation, do we not, where maybe you consider yourself a person that can apply logic. I think that of you and of Monica and probably many of the listeners here. Yet we find we have so many people that we live around who have got out of the habit, let's put it that way, I'm being kind, of asking questions or even questioning authority on even a very basic level. And so when you talked about sticking your thumb up your bottom, you see what I did there? I'm being very English about it. It's, I wouldn't be surprised if that came through if a lot of people did. And I don't find it amusing. It's really quite chilling, the whole thing of people succumbing to these diktats from these people is the worrying part of this. It's not actually, I mean, obviously the consequences of them having taken vaccines, as that report just illustrated, are proving to be ever increasingly worse, he said clumsily, but they are incrementally. They're developing into a much worse situation. And of course, I suspect this is the reason why they've been so quiet for it. This was all part of their plan. We'll have a big sort of drama at the beginning. We'll scare the pants off of everybody. They scared the pants off a huge number of people who've been vaccinated 3, 4, I know people half a dozen times. And the more they have, the greater the chances of leaving this place, well before their due sell-by date. So I think it's very important what you're addressing there.
Yeah, my whole first of all, for people that don't know me, I most of my career, my life of working was actually for a computer company. I was working for IBM, and I worked for IBM in Canada. I worked for IBM in Germany, and I spent 3 years in a development lab in the United States of America. And this taught me so much about like operating systems are required for any kind of a computing system and so forth. And everything my whole way of looking at this is like an operating system for a computer, and then I started realizing that like religion, language, all these things are like an operating system for us that are guiding us in how we manage life, how we manage the data that we observe, and what we do with it, and so forth. And right now we are suffering from a very insane criminal operating system that has been imposed on us, as if a computer programmer intentionally programs us as computers in a way that will eventually lead us to our self-destruction. So everything I see happening, I look through this lens and I figure out what is the most efficient or effective way to counter that. And that's why I don't even look at my prison terms or anything or as punishment. That was part of the deal, or part of the it's like if you want to be a soldier in the military, you're going to go through some very hard training that will be anything other than comfortable and soft. But that's part of the deal. You go through that, and if you pass it, then you will be a good soldier at the end, or a good mountain climber, or whatever you have to do. It's not all pleasant and soft. And going through the prison system, that was actually, it ends up being the most valuable time of my life, okay, because of what I learned there and could only learn under those circumstances. And this is continuing. It's not over yet. And all of our people have to start engaging the system, meaning just do whatever you see is not in order and speak up about it and continue learning, continue like the words that they use to control us. It's a big, vast topic kind of thing, but that's why I'm also very optimistic, because I don't feel like, they've put me in prison for all this time and a waste of time. No, it was part of the deal, part of the working. I have a cousin, for example, she politically correct took the vaccinations, and 2 days after the second shot, she was dead. And at no time was my coffin as small and cramped and permanent as her coffin is. Like, she will never come out of her coffin. I'm out of my cell.
It's... maybe I've avoided it because the consequences of it are not good. I mean, I don't want to, if I start using adjectives, we'll run out to describe how bad it all is. And also, I don't think, your buoyancy is extremely inspiring, because it's no good, no matter what has happened, as literally sitting in the mire, moaning about certain things. I'm just looking all the time to try and assist whoever I can, the checkout lady at the shopping at the shops and places like this, to talk and engage with them, to try and find out where people's thinking is at. Maybe they feel, on the other side, they've dealt people such a psychologically massive blow, which they have, that they can just go quiet now and let the whole thing sort of run through. Although there are murmurings, that article that I read is one of them, that seem to be building up. It's coming back. I've noticed it just casually from glancing through things. There was something else as well that was an interesting comment, I think, that Monica made to me, or that you had made, with regards to this conversation that one of the guards or one of the people at the prison had with you towards the end, about them not wanting to see you back there. Could you go into that a little bit? Because it's a very interesting little comment, I think.
Yes. Actually, it was really intense in Landsberg, where I spent most of I was 2.5 years in Landsberg prison. And that was where I went through the harshest suppression, where they really stomped on me for my resistance to this COVID nonsense. And I was in isolation mode, like I said, for a year and a half there. Mm-hmm. And then 3 weeks before I was to be released, they lifted the mask mandates. And then they opened my cell door and says, "You're out of isolation mode. Now you can mix with the other orcs in this prison," and so forth. And then they, then an incident happened, but I can't go through that whole incident. It would take too much time right now. But after this incident, the guards and the prisoners, it was like one voice. They were saying, "Schaeffer, don't come back in this prison. We need you outside." And what I did there, they could have charged me for something that would put me in prison a lot longer than the 6 months I got now. It was showing the guards, like how high my dog jump in detail, like, and so forth. Mm-hmm. This forbidden symbol, but they're controlling us like you would control your horse or your dog. This is how they're controlling us. When a stagecoach rider, the stagecoachman gets the whole team of horses moving just with a click of his tongue, he goes like that, and the horses know.
You do that very well. You do that very well. It's very good.
And the horses know that they are now supposed to start moving. Now, no horse in its natural condition would do anything if some monkey somewhere clicked his tongue like that. But he's been conditioned to do that. And this is how we've been conditioned, through the control of nonsensical stories, about Holocaust and Anne Frank and blah, 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 And words like Nazi, racist. I mean, these are words that are just meaningless words, but they are so loaded with emotions that have been hardwired into our system, and they trigger these emotions with these click of the tongue, little symbols, and so forth, to do whatever we're supposed to do. And once we understand how this programming has been done to us, it's easy to come out. But when I started understanding this, I noticed myself how I would start twitching and have a higher pulse rate with certain symbols and words. And I said, so I have to overcome this. And I did some self-therapy by forcing myself to use these words and just to get over it. Like the word Nazi would make most people just tremble and fear and say, oh no, I'm not that, start excusing and apologizing and so forth. Never, ever apologize when you are called a silly name. It's just a word. Don't apologize. Can you imagine a horse apologizing for moving because when he hears a click of a tongue? It's just a conditioning. We have to get over this conditioning by understanding how it's been done. It's a false programming that leads us straight to the slaughterhouse. We are supposed to be slaughtered, and that's where we find ourselves. But once we understand that, we come out of it, and we are masses of people are now coming out of it. And once you start coming out of it, you just accelerate this healing, this coming out. And that you can observe that in any healing process, in fact. Anyway,
yes, I think it's absolutely spot on. I mean, he's been Yuri Bezmenov's speech from X number of years ago in his interview with Ed Griffin is bombing around all over the place. I keep seeing little memes about it, talking about demoralized people, and that you can show them all the factual truth in the world and they cannot see it. And learning to understand how we come to misunderstandings is key. But of course, it's not for everyone. A lot of people don't even know they can enter into these conversations. That little phrase, though, by the way, from the Guard, "We need you out there," really, very brief though it is, would indicate to me that you had been having an effect on them. They now were beginning to associate with your viewpoint and see that it was clear, because I suppose many of them over this 4-year period had been able to, come to their own conclusions as well. I don't work on the basis that everybody that works in the prison system is dense, but obviously they've been conditioned to be prison guards, and now they're having to ask questions about that, I assume.
Yes, what I noticed now, especially at the end of my second prison term now, when I just came out less than a month ago, I noticed that there's a real division now, and people are measured by how much they understand of what's going on. And people who don't want to understand anything because they think it will threaten the comforts they're enjoying, these false comforts, will be the object of total ridicule and scorn. And we are also expecting that there's a point in time where people who have missed the boat, will, one of their only options left will in fact be suicide or going crazy. They're not going to, and that's what we're expecting, millions and countless millions of suicides, because these people will, their whole fantasy world will be just crumbling before their eyes, and that's happening now. In fact, I mean, these suicides
it is.
I
think we're all prone to that, though. I think it's a matter of, it is the eternal vigilance mantra that you need to keep saying to yourself. And I get caught out every now and again. I'll absorb a news story. I'll feel bad about it and go, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why?" Half of the things I don't even know if they're true. I mean, one of the things I've mentioned here is these events. Excuse me, that they're describing don't even have to have taken place. The mere fact that they promote them and project them into your mind causes the anxiety that they're after, whether they're true or not.
Yeah, for people who are suffering from anxiety, which is only normal, but try to get into the mindset of understanding that this is the first day of the rest of your life, and it's only too late after you actually die. Then it's too late for you as an individual, but for everybody else, it's not yet too late. For every living person, it's not too late. This is the first day of the rest of your life, and now is the time to prove that your life was actually worth something. Do not go to your grave with a construct of lies in your head. Can you imagine on your gravestone, the writing says, "This guy believed in corona snakes," and Holocaust. I mean, come on. I mean, and the history of the World War II, World War I, and you have to go way back to further back than the French Revolution. In fact, you have to go back actually thousands of years. And these people, the perpetrators, have learned how to do this going back thousands of years, ever since the thing called money, which is a placeholder for real value. And they all figured out that once you control the money, it's like controlling the electricity for computers, or controlling, the blood in an animal or something. If you poison it, then the animal will die. It's a biological. This is a biological response that we're experiencing now to a biological attack, and we will come out of it, because all the factors that enabled them to get to this point are changing, and we are now finding the motivation to actually figure out what's going on. And the motivation consists of pain, consists of dissatisfaction, consists of, we'll put it this way, I don't know of a single person in my life who likes to be made an ass of. And they have made an ass of all of us, okay? So we're all going to come clean on this, because, you don't want to go into your grave with that burden resting on your shoulders.
No, you don't. Monica, your situation, because Alfred was mentioning then, and I was aware of this, but it was good that he brought it up, is that you too have spent some time at the pleasure of the authorities, which was a few years ago. Yet I don't think you were placed into solitary confinement like Alfred was. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, I think that in retrospect, my little stay in their, you could call it summer camp, was really like a Sunday picnic compared to what Alfred then went through when the COVID nonsense began because of all those lockdowns. So, it was a shock to my system when I got arrested and thrown into the gulag there. But I have to say that I would not trade away that part of my life for anything. So I really do have somewhat similar sentiments about it all as Alfred does. Like, it was a huge learning experience, and it was something that, I would not trade that part of my life away for anything. It was really, you don't think of it in terms of, oh, is this fun, or is this like, fun and games? It's not like that. It's just, it enriches, it enriched my life beyond measure, I can tell you. That's how I feel about that. Yeah.
Can I add something? Yeah. I always consider that our prison term started with Monica going in. I was still on the outside, and it ended basically when I came out now, just recently. And Monica's time was, she went in like an icebreaker to sort of break the ice on certain subjects and so forth. And Monica's 6 months earlier entry into the prison system made mine so much easier, because she was in the women's prison in Stadelheim or Munich. I was in the men's prison, but a lot of the people, like the social workers or the people that work in the prison system, they knew the name Schaeffer already. So Monica was very famous there, and she had her violin there and all that kind of stuff. So Monica really broke the ice for me. So I have to say thank you very much, Monica.
Is this a case of little or big sister looking after little or big brother? Is this one of these examples? In a kind of strange way. Is it?
Yeah. It was great.
That is so kind of Alfred to speak that way, that I, sort of like the icebreaker, I navigated the waters a little bit. But it's true that a lot of the staff, they all knew each other in both the men's and the women's prison. And there were some things that were overlapping, like you say, the social workers, or the what do you call Seelsorger? That's the
spiritual
guy. Not a priest. What do you call it in a different sense? Anyway, whatever. So that was pretty interesting times. But there were so many things that I wanted to respond to from what Alfred was saying. But I'll start with just about the last part there. This is the first day of the rest of your life. I love that. And that together, combine that with this thing about fear. That is how our enemy likes to control us and our actions is with the fear. And you talked about it, Paul, and Alfred, you talked about it in terms of, they scared everybody into rolling up the sleeve, and they also guilt tripped people. They really rolled out the guilt tripping, especially to the children, like, oh, you want to protect your grandparents, so you should get vaccinated, and and almost putting it on to the children that if their grandparent died at that time, it was their fault, the child's fault, because they went and visited the grandparent and weren't vaccinated. That's just an aside, but it's all the fear. It's the fear-based and trauma-based control of the people. And I say, the government is the enemy of the people because the government has been hijacked and is not our friend. And this is apparent in basically every day now. And we did start out earlier talking about the fact that they're rolling out more and more draconian, tyrannical laws, which are like the boa constrictor, just squeezing the life out of us. And if people, I think some people are still kind of wandering around pretty much asleep to this, and it's because we still can find food. We still have food on the table, and most of us still have a shelter, roof over our head. But this could change, actually, because they've been setting up the conditions for famine, and famine is one of their favorite methods of getting rid of a lot of people.
Indeed.
How many, like right now, Texas, let's just look at what's going on there. They're calling them wildfires. They are not wildfires. There is evidence of these energy weapons, directed energy weapons being employed, and we have seen that in the California fires, the Lahaina, Hawaii fires. And so there's all these events taking place. And then what they do is they combine these events. In the mainstream, they call them wildfires or flooding that occurred because of, whatever, just the extreme weather. And then they say, oh, this is climate change. And of course, they have really targeted the young people, especially with the fear of what they are doing in terms of, impacting the climate, to the extent that some youth have actually signed pledges to never have children because they want to save the planet. So, that's the ultimate goal of our enemy, is to have us stop existing. And so aside from killing many of us outright, they actually get us to stop reproducing. So the attack is on all fronts, and I'm not even sure where to begin here because there's so much to talk about. I just want to give one example, though, something that I learned about yesterday in a conversation with some folks from Germany. And Alfred and I talked about this just a couple of minutes before our show started today. And I just want to bring it in as one example of the many where the government and those who are aiming to destroy us and kill us and enslave the rest of us, how they wage war on us. So a couple of years ago in this river valley called the Ahr, that's AHR, in Germany, there was major flooding. And I remember seeing reports about it at the time, and it sure did look like it was an act of war. But of course they blamed climate change on that these events will always become more severe because of global warming and all that. But that was an engineered event that made it very, very bad. There were reservoirs that they kept intentionally full before the storm came, and they knew the storm was coming, and then the storm came, and then probably in the middle of the night they opened these up so that there was like a 9-meter high wall of water. Anyway, just to make the story short, the initial response by government was none. The next response was impediment to those people who were actually trying to volunteer and help. So they impeded that from happening. Then when they finally did respond with help, and I'm talking about government/military help, the first thing they did was bring in the vaccination clinic, or the vaccination on wheels, like a truck or whatever, to help vaccinate the people, because that's what they absolutely needed in the aftermath of having their places, their town, their village completely destroyed by walls of water that flooded through. So that was pretty interesting. But there's another aspect to this. This was new to me. And apparently the people on the ground who were impacted, so the German people, they themselves being so indoctrinated, so demoralized through decades of this demoralization, they refused and turned away some of this help coming because they did not want any help from Nazis, because the media had whipped up a frenzy of, reporting on how some of these people volunteering to help were right-wing, radicals. So just think about that. Like this is sort of a recipe for, I mean, what do you call that? Like it's demoralization and combined with, a act of war, combined with no help, but now we're going to help you with giving you some bioweapons. Like,
well,
I don't
can
know.
I just interject?
Yeah.
It wasn't the victims of the Ahrtal that didn't want so-called Nazis. It was the media that was saying we don't want Nazis. You see, because everybody that went there were people who had feet on the ground, were down-to-earth people. And they wanted to help, as you would normally do, as we all do normally when there's a disaster. But anybody who's still a normal person in this age that we live in is a Nazi, is a racist. I mean, every animal you look at out there is a Nazi, is a racist. These are fake words. And
that's right.
Going back to when I started talking and I said I look at everything at like an operating system on a computer, and when you look at included in the operating system of our enemy, you have to look at the Talmud, you have to look at the protocols, you have to look at how they've behaved in the past, their history, and then everything makes sense. And how have they been so successful since 1945 is because the whole planet was extremely traumatized back then and susceptible to the nonsense that they've been feeding us since then. And this is what's enabled them to take it to the point we see now. In fact, this agenda was spelled out over 100 years ago. The self-chosenites said that with 3 world wars, we can take over this planet. That was over 100 years ago. I mean, people like Henry Ford, they saw the dysfunction taking place in the United States, and he spent a huge amount of resources to try to fix it. And he called them the International Jew, and he put out put a copy of the protocols with his analysis. And had we listened to him back then we would not have had a 9/11. We would not have had World War II, that followed World War I, and we would not have everybody getting vaccinated to death now. And now we have to continue at the point we find ourselves and pay very close attention to what those people in the past had warned us about, and that's what we have to do. Like the foundation, the basis of everything we do is the truth and nothing but the truth. And if we make an error somewhere in our judgment, then show us the evidence. We'll revise our what we believe based on evidence. But we're not going to go back to believing these nonsensical lies that lead us straight to our own grave, straight to the slaughterhouse.
Yeah, I mean, Ford, I've mentioned him before. He did some amazing work, and yet he also illustrates another point which is not so optimistic, which is that there he is, an intelligent man with considerable fiscal resources, and didn't necessarily put them all on the line because it wasn't as developed, the sort of control of America at the time, as it is now. So he had this opportunity, this window of opportunities to communicate these things, and of course has subsequently been vilified for it. No one's really disproved what he said. But of course, as you know, the truth doesn't appear to be a sort of legal currency in a court of law. It's not really relevant anymore because of the whole of the court system, certainly over here. My impression is it's been hijacked, to an excessive degree, and the parallels with what occurred in Russia circa 1917 going forward are terrifyingly similar because, and I've been kind of waiting for this in my bones for many years. It almost sounds like a sort of an odd thing, but looking out for it because they began to hijack the language first, demonize certain words. Once you are restricted in using certain words, or you are going to receive an awful lot of negative feedback if you use them, people begin to self-censor. And I think this is part of the process that we've been undergoing for a long time. People don't know it. You wouldn't know it. But we're involved in a process of self-censoring ourselves so that we don't speak as freely and as robustly as we used to. Certainly, normal discourse in Britain is not like it used to be when I was younger. That's my perception of it. People might say, well, prove that. Well, I can't. I'm just giving you my feeling about it. But there was certainly a sense of people being more easy. And it was much easier to insult people back in the day. And I think being insulted and dealing with them is part of growing up. It's an important part of it, you know. It doesn't mean that just because someone insults you that the insult is accurate, but people do that. My mum used to have a phrase. She said, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't have joined. And the other side can't take a joke. They can't. Whereas we could, you know, within our culture, we've been able to take a joke. It's part of the sort of regular banter, certainly of the British, it's based on abuse, really.
Sticks and stones.
Yeah.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but
yeah.
How did it go? You'll
never
hurt me.
Yeah, words will never hurt me.
That's it.
Most of our great heroes of the past would today, if they were here today, all be put in prison. And I'm talking about like people like Charles Lindbergh, Henry Ford. I mean, the list goes on and on. What about General Robert E. Lee? The monuments of him all being taken down.
Yes.
And instead of that, we got Pride Month, Pride Black Month, everything. But like, and then when you see
criminalization of if you say it's okay to be white.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Monica, because I've got something here which is I hadn't prepared much for the show because I don't need to, because I know the words are flowing like a river, which is how it should be. But I wanted those many listeners will be aware, maybe some not. An individual over here, a gentleman called Sam Melia, from my hometown of Leeds in Yorkshire. Was found guilty the other week because of his intentions, not because of breaking the law. He didn't do anything unlawful or illegal or wrong, that he hasn't broken that. But the judge viewed that his intentions were bad. I came across a little article that was written January the 31st whilst this was going on. This was before the judgment came out. And I'm not going to read all of it because it's way too long, but there's just one little paragraph here which is and it's about British speech legislation, but you can take this and apply it probably anywhere, wherever our people are living. It says, how has British speech legislation been used to secure this criminal conviction? I mean, he wrote things such as reject white guilt, nationalism is nurture, and we will be a minority in our homeland by 2066. All these are true. He'd put them on stickers. The one I think they quoted the most is, it's okay to be white. But this, he goes on, it says, been used to secure this criminal conviction and to return to the idea of the koan. He quoted a little poem, a sort of puzzle poem. He says, how can pro-white advocates advocate for anything when even the more passive elements of their argument have been criminalized? Yes, indeed. The riddle is straightforward. What can be said when saying anything runs the risk of imprisonment? In fact, I don't know if I've said something in these first 48 minutes that run that risk. Maybe we need to start to communicate by telepathy and be completely silent. What are we talking about here? I don't know what to say. And I think I mentioned to you, Monica, maybe the solution is all of you naughty people out there listening to this, thinking things even close to this or even in opposition to it, maybe we need to all get together and go down to the police station and arrest ourselves. Because we're saying, well, look, we don't know whether we're committing a crime, but we probably are. I think you need to lock us all up. I can't explain it to you, but I just thought something the other day, and I just realized I probably shouldn't be thinking it. Is this where it's going? Well, of course it's where it's going. They're seeking to control your thought by basically hemming you in one word at a time.
Sorry, I was just going to say, when we just repeat what they actually tell us. Like for example, Biden. There's a clip of him talking about by such and such a year, whites will be in an absolute minority. We will be in an absolute minority, and that's really great. And that was not so far away, right? But if we say that, we just simply point out, like you just said, Paul, that's a crime. That's a crime. Somebody's in jail for that right now. Samuel, what was his last name again?
Melia, I think. Meliea,
Yes,
or Melia. I don't know. I'm pronouncing Melia,
yeah.
but I apologize if I've got the pronunciation wrong. But he's a good man with a good family. And I've seen a lot of these events over the years, but this one, I know from comments I've received from colleagues, has got to a lot of people. This is, what do you want me to say? It's out of order? Yes, it is. Am I supposed to get histrionic about it? I feel that way. What if I thump a table and shout about it? Will it make any difference? Well, it appears not, because most of the crowd go, don't make any more fuss. Just ignore it and they'll leave us alone. They won't leave you alone. They're not going to do that.
The day before I was released, just now several weeks ago, I had a visit. The guard told me, Mr. Schaeffer, the police want to talk to you tomorrow at 10 o'clock or something like that. So that was the day before I was going to be released. And they came, and I had envisioned, they're going to slap something on the table to not let me out. But actually, I'll tell you something. It was an opportunity they gave me to make it very clear. And I used the opportunity, and I got out. And this is what they asked me if I now have good judgment. In German, it's sind Sie einsichtig. In other words, do you understand how to behave so you don't do something criminal anymore, like words and so forth?
Right.
And I said, yes, I have now got sound judgment. And I had a little cheat sheet that I prepared for this, and I had 4 points on it. I will never be guilty of failure to render assistance. For example, if you see a house that's just catching fire and there's some little children in there, then you have to sort of do something to get them out into safety. I will not just walk away, pretend I didn't see it. I will also never make myself guilty of obstruction of justice. I will also never become guilty as an accomplice through silence. And I will also never allow myself to become guilty of something that constitutes aiding and abetting a crime. And then I said, now, if you have blots of toner on paper that you call laws, and these are all self-contradicting laws, then that is your problem, not mine. Okay. And then I went on and I told them about the pilot story that Monica told me of a woman who had a couple of sons. Now, one was a pilot, and they wanted to force him to get vaccinated. He refused, and they fired him. Their other woman's son was a bit softer in the head and did get vaccinated. He's already dead now, okay, from the vaccination. Now, the airline company that fired that first son came back on their knees asking him to please come back. You'll get more pay for less work. We need unvaccinated pilots. And then I said, all these people who are involved in these stories, which are unfolding many all over the place now. I mean, you read the statistics, Paul, at the beginning of the show. All of these people are slowly converting from unpolitical, maybe couch potatoes, into something more like Terminators, okay? They want to see justice. They're just beginning to figure out what's been done to them. The self-chosenites, or eternal poisoners of the wells, have done a very thorough job. And by God, we know what to do. And that's why these people who have also been indoctrinated in that tribe are coming over to us in droves. They are going at each other's throats as we come together and understand the big picture. So it's basically the game is over for them, and everybody will be measured by at what point in time did they realize that? What did they do or not do after they realized it? And there's a point in time after which, if they didn't do anything yet, they will not be taken seriously by anybody. A little bit like if you're a little child playing in the sandbox outside your house and you see the attic's on fire. Now, a little child will look at it and say, oh, Daddy will fix that. Well, at what point do you grow from being a little child to being Mommy or Daddy and doing something? something with it, dealing with it, something, anything. But don't sit and play in the sandbox and put your head in the sand or up somebody's ass or something and not do something. It's your responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. And together we can easily manage this in a fairly civilized way. Otherwise, we're all going to go down the tube. Okay, that's it.
I don't take issue with anything you've said. I think you're actually spot on with that. I mean, one of the developments for maybe for people like you and me and others who have been investigating into this area for decades, which is true, and had a very good understanding of the basics of it, the lay of the land has changed considerably because of this attack. I mean, prior to 2020, I suppose my modus operandi was, I will learn the hidden side of history, because every time I've looked at it, and as soon as you start inquiring it, you have a charge from it. Every time I've looked at it, I see that I am getting a fuller picture. I see that there's a consistent pattern. I see that all the history that I've been taught to consume is part of the truth, although it's wound through with a lot of lies, but it is thoroughly incomplete. And in completing, or getting close to a completion of history by effectively reading the records of the so-called losers throughout history, suddenly a very different picture appears. And you realize that as a race, we have been set at each other's throats again and again and again and again. And that process is now in full swing. So the idea of a sort of an academic approach appeals to me very much, of course, because it seems to be peaceful. And I used to think, mistakenly, of course, that we could discuss our way through this with people and say, look, this is not really working for us. And would you just pack it in? And the planet's pretty big, or the plane, if you're a flat earth person, this is a pretty big place. We can all just do our thing. We just need some sort of sensible agreements. And of course, there are a lot of sensible agreements that have existed, but they now have been overwhelmed by this determination for something, a force in all its different aspects, and it comes in more than one. There's lots of different sides to this, seeking to gain and grab a hold of all things. And, I used to get this comment, you probably got it too, I imagine. I would mention this to people who didn't know much in the past, and they would say to me, but why do they want to do that? I can't see why anybody would want to do it. It's a very good question. Indeed. And I think from our perspective as people who are trying to live better lives and are looking for more beauty in the world and cherish things from the past, which we know we've lost, it's very difficult to sort of work it out. You go, why can't you just all calm down and just do a bit of gardening? But they can't. They can't. There's something very foul at the base of all of this thing. And now it's sprung up. It's in our face. And, although I have studied quite a bit of history, certainly from, I guess, Henry VIII is a key period for me, because that was with the Reformation, so-called, and right through to today. What we find is that we actually are now literally in the middle of World War III, and it's not the kind of thing that most of us probably anticipated, because as Monica was saying earlier, with regards to, say, this event in Texas, with the cattle, I don't watch the news here in the UK, but I just have the strong sense that it's not been reported at all. Oh, some cows have got burnt. How many? Have you seen the scale of this? I mean, we've got clips of this stuff coming through. And everywhere you go, there's this insane idea about food somehow damaging the environment. We're talking the most bizarre lack of logical thinking, supposedly, in a huge number of people, although I suspect it's really a massive sort of multi-layered psychological attack where they admit the truth one day and then deny it the week afterwards, and you get confused. And this is because maybe we are accustomed, whether we like it or not, to actually looking to the authority figures to sort things out. This is still a very strong behavioural pattern with many of us to a greater or lesser degree. And we have to strip that out. And that's not easy, except it gets a lot easier when you're with like-minded people who are looking to tell our story and not keep on being a part of their very, very bad story. That's kind of where I'm at with things at the moment.
Wonderful. Sorry, I should clear my throat before I start talking.
Oh, I had a bit of that a few minutes ago. I know it happens.
So noticing patterns and connecting the dots, more and more people are doing that now, because it is just so in our faces now that, when we are they are gaslighting us. Like you said, Paul, one week they'll tell us one thing and the following week they'll tell us the opposite and pretend like they never did tell us the other thing. And this food thing, I hope we have some time to talk a little bit more about that in the second hour, because it is the fundamental of life, and they are inverting everything where, like you say, what they're like, food is actually ruining the planet. Like, I mean, from cow farts to we have to reduce our carbon footprint. You know what that actually means? That means it's completely reducing life. In other words, extinguishing life. And I'll just point out this: to live, the word live, you turn that backwards, and in other words, everything in this world is being turned upside down and backwards, and the palindrome of that is evil. It literally is evil, and this is actually quite symbolic of what they're doing. They're saying carbon, we have to reduce our carbon footprint. Well, why do greenhouse operators actually pump more carbon dioxide into their greenhouses to make the plants grow? And so everything they've been telling us is a lie, and we are a carbon-based life form. So when they say reduce our carbon footprint to zero, that means reduce us to zero.
You don't say.
You don't say.
Hey, Monica, why don't you... Monica, why don't you...
I'll tell you what, before we do it, let's just take a little bit. So we've had, this hour has disappeared, of course. It lasted about 3 minutes as far as I can work out. Okay. Let's take a break. We've been talking about some pretty serious stuff. Let's bring a bit of beauty in. As listeners know here, I ask the interviewees here on the show to select a bit of music. And Monica has selected a bit. This is a slightly longer piece than usual. This is 6 minutes and 40 seconds. It's a wonderful piece of classical music. It's the opening movement from something. Monica can fill us in afterwards, but we're going to take a break. This runs for about 6.5 minutes. So if you need to powder your nose, top up the gin bottle or whatever you've got to do, or pour more coffee or tea, please do. We're going to play this song. We'll have a little break. We'll be back in about 6 minutes' time.
Attention all listeners, are you seeking uninterrupted access to WBN 324 Talk Radio despite incoming censorship hurdles? Well, it's a breeze. Just grab and download Opera Browser, then type in WBN324.zil and stay tuned for unfiltered discussions around the clock. That's WBN324.zil.
The views, opinions and content of the show hosts and their guests appearing on the World Broadcasting Network are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of its owners, partners and other hosts or this network. Thank you for listening to WBN 324 Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to part two, the second hour. Just gone 9 minutes past 9 here in the UK, 9 minutes past 4, I guess, US Eastern. And that was a wonderful piece of music selected by Monica. And Monica, what was that piece of music?
That was Johann Sebastian Bach, the Brandenburg Concerto Number 4, the first movement, and it was played on original instruments, is what I read in the description. And it fits very well. I know you said it was a little longer than what you usually like to play, but wonderful little sticker I saw on somebody's violin case: more Bach, less talk. So not the greatest pronunciation of the name Bach, but you got to make it rhyme, right? More Bach, less talk. So there you go. That's what we just had.
So we have a radio station, I think it's at Radio 4, where they do all the classical stuff, and he goes, and you've just been listening to the first movement of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto Number 4 in G major. I always wanted to do that. They always have these lovely, polite, calm voices when they play classical music, and everybody goes, ooh, that's nice. So that was wonderful.
Well, yeah. You did very well with that, Paul. I have to say, you could do that. You could have one of those classical stations. And
I don't think, not me. I'm a Nazi, remember? I'm all of these things. Apparently, so.
Oh, hey, that would fit very well with the latest, is that this classical music stuff, it's racist, don't you know? Even to teach it in universities now, and there's been places where they don't want to have this stuff from the old dead white men. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, I know. It's odd because that's the only music that I want. I'm obviously must be really evil then. It's just,
yes,
it's unavoidable, isn't it? But it's just wonderful to have a bit of beauty injected, and we've got a lot on tap. And I've mentioned here before, this little phrase of Plato, those who tell the stories rule society. And I think music like that is part of our story. And we must be telling our stories, not just verbally with words, but also with music, and pointing everybody in the right direction, which is not too difficult, because as a people, we tend to respond to beauty very well. And I think the absence of it is definitely a key ingredient in this, is obviously the theme for today, this demoralisation process. You take beauty out of the cities, which have been completely gutted, with these concrete block buildings everywhere. This is a favourite topic of mine. I'm always coming back to it. But it's definitely a key part of the whole thing. And
yes.
So no wonder it's bad, because it reminds us of those days when excellence, you see, of course, Bach and all these other people, they're not into equality, a condition, of course, which doesn't exist. It's never been known to exist and can't exist. They're about excellence. And as a people, we really are into excellent exponents of anything. We just go, wow. And some of us, you just have to say, well, I really couldn't do that. And but fortunately, this man has done it, so I get to listen to it. How marvelous is that? It's wonderful.
Yes. Beauty, Paul. You just said something that reminded me of a trip I took to what used to be the East Germany. And this trip, I think it was in 2009. And I was visiting a relative there, and I was stunned by row houses, these ugly gray boxes of buildings that had become apartment buildings for the people. And this replaced the beautiful, stunning architecture that had existed before World War II. Had destroyed so much of that, and this was the communist way, was to build these row houses of ugly gray square boxes. Yes. That were maybe 5 or 6 stories high, and they were just all the same, and it was just so ugly.
Cattle sheds.
And you see, it's the
cattle
absence. Sheds? Yeah, the absence of beauty, like that would have an impact on everybody's psyche. And imagine the children, the babies being born, and then the children growing up in the absence of beauty. They must develop a different psyche, a different brain would develop out of that than if you were surrounded by beauty, not just in nature, but also in the very architecture of your homes, Monica, and towns. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have to remind the listeners that part of Germany that you were just talking about with their cement blocks, for living in, that was called the Democratic Republic of Germany, whereas we were the Bundesrepublik of Germany, sort of thing. So if that's what this democracy is all about. That's what we have. They're always talking about a democracy. Well, that was those ugly buildings. That was the democratic. That's what they called themselves, the democratic part of Germany. I mean, But another question I had, Monica, was why don't you explain to listeners what you meant by gaslighting? I mean, I know that, but that's a term that I haven't known that long either. You're talking about how they're gaslighting us. Why don't you tell them what that means?
Apparently, was it last year or the year before? It was the most researched term. It was the word gaslighting, because everybody was starting to hear it and think, what is that? And we were being gaslit to the extreme with the COVID stuff that was going on. One week they tell us this, and the next week they tell us the opposite, right? Wear masks. No, don't wear masks. Yes, do wear a mask. That kind of thing in the very beginning anyway. So gaslighting, I guess it originated, I think, Paul, you might know more about this. There was a movie, I think, the 1930s or something.
It's to do with a film, actually. It's to do with a film called Gaslight, starring Ingrid Bergman. And I've forgotten the name of the lead actor in it. He's very good as well. Anyway, they get married. She's very beautiful, of course, and very sensitive and rather unworldly in her views. And he plays upon her fears by creating fears for her, driving her half mad, controlling her life. She goes basically out of her mind. She becomes an ever more hysterical person, which he then says, look, this is proof I was telling you you're not well, but he's actually causing her illness to happen and then using it to justify trying to get her locked up. I can't remember the full plot, probably to steal her fortune or whatever.
Yes.
But it's a gripping movie. It's about 1946 or mid-40s or something. It's an excellent movie. That's where it comes from. The projection of false fears, the creation of a kind of psychotic worry in people, particularly those that you, in this case, that you are pretending to love and care for and be the guardian of, isn't that what the government does? We're looking after you, but by golly, we're going to scare your pants off till you won't know whether you're coming or going. Oh, thank you very much.
And the basic premise is that they will tell you something and then tell you something that goes completely against what they just told you, but they make it look like, no, you're just remembering wrong. So they really do drive you mad in the insane sense of the word mad. So that is the meaning of the gaslighting term. And that I did see that movie actually not too long ago. Somebody sent it to me. It's a very good movie. And the man who was really evil, if you ask me, he was hiding things, and then he would, or moving things, and make her be crazy, because he would not tell her that he moved the things, but he would basically make it like she is going crazy, that these things were not there in the first place, or whatever. Right. Like he played her, and he played on her good nature to the extreme that I just, oh my goodness, you can't watch that and not be terribly moved and angry at that man and just feel for her.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
It's terrible. Is it Paul Heinried or something? I can't remember. My memory's a bit. He's very good. He's got some kind of an accent. He's kind of a European guy, I think, that plays the role. But you reminded me of something from a colleague I haven't spoken to him for a few years. An ex-British military assassin. If I can get him on the show at some point, I will. He's in his 80s now, but I spoke to him briefly on the phone about 3 or 4 months ago over the winter period, and he's firing on all cylinders. His story is astonishing. It really is truly astonishing. And but I remember him saying that most of what they did, he said, you've been misled about that, in the sense that you see all these guys running around with backpacks and all this stuff and all this sort of gung-ho stuff. He said, we don't do that. You don't do that. You can do all that. They can do all that kind of stuff. They're very tough people. But he said most of it is psychological. And one of the ways that they can absolutely begin a process like that, like gaslighting, is they can get into someone's property that they think is completely safe and put a mug of tea on the carpet in the middle of the floor. That's all they do. Things like that.
Yeah. Move
and those
things.
people go, I can be got at any time. Yeah, you can.
That's right.
So you better watch it. You better watch what you're doing. And of course, the other side are doing things like this all the time. We think it's just, the politicians are going to get together and talk. There's just an awful lot of violence behind all of their words, because really, it's a mob war. It's a very good analogy. They're like mobs and gangs of mafia groups. And they don't have it. They're not all fully in agreement, although it appears at the moment that's the case, simply because you look around at all these laws supposedly about free speech and hate laws and hate crimes, and they've, of course, all sprung up in the same nations all at the same time. And I guess the key one, just coming back to the COVID topic, is that all of the so-called nations of the West all responded practically in identical fashion almost overnight, which means that the plan was already in. There is no independent thinking. They're all taking their instructions from some centralized hidden think tank or think tanks or stink tanks or whatever we want to call them, and they're compromised. And that sort of euphemism that I hate the government, and the government really is no longer just a turn of phrase. It is literally true, and this is encouraging that more and more people see it directly for what it is, which I suspect is in great part one of the reasons why they're trying to panic people and terrify them even more. And we tailed off there just before the music talking about food, about this completely insane attack upon food from our perspective, but very sane from theirs, because they're trying to thin down their possessions. They view us as their possessions. There's no two ways about it, and it's possible that we've been deceived into that. I had Roger Sales was on here a few weeks ago, a wonderful show, where I finally began to understand exactly what he's been driving at. I've known Roger for a long time and helped him with all sorts of things. I'm pretty familiar with his stuff, but it was very useful for me personally because I got to the bottom of what he was driving at. And one of the things, what he was basically saying is, they do view us as our possessions because we've been deceived into some kind of a contract. And we unknowingly, yes, but nevertheless, because we're not rebutting it, because we're not actually telling them that a fraud has been put, it just carries on. And I don't know if I'd mentioned this in pre-show chats with you, Alfred, maybe we did, but there was this instance a few years ago in Germany where this defense lawyer, Sylvia Stolz, and I forgot the name of who she was defending, which is terrible of me, but
Ernst Zundel.
I don't think
Zundel,
it was him.
wasn't
No, it was someone else after that. It wasn't Zundel.
Okay.
It was somebody else, I think, but
maybe
she got sentenced.
Mahler, I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. I think it was that. I think it was him. Yes, and she defended him too vigorously, according to the court. You've defended him too vigorously,
and like Ernst Zundel. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and then therefore 2 years. You're going down for 2 years. And I talked to Roger about this.
3 years.
Was it 3?
Even more. It's even worse.
So you've done your job. You did your job with great energy and vigor. So you're going to get locked up. Where was the rest of the legal profession in Germany around that woman? What were they? Why nothing turned up? Which tells you that the rest of it, of course, is all paid off and bought off, and they're all just nodding heads. It's an appalling state. I don't know how they look at themselves. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're so deranged and gone. But sorry.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll just interject there. That fact alone about lawyers going to jail, because she's not the only one, and the fact that giving evidence in court that might support our conclusions, or evidence to explain how we reached our conclusions, this is illegal in Germany. That fact alone should be the big red flag for people to realize, oh, there's something wrong with this story.
Yes.
But go. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. It's a very, very useful point. It is, because if you draw that line of thinking out, Monica, I tend to. There was an incident I mentioned here before, but repetition really is the key for us in many ways, because we have to get these points, or I want to sort of get the points across. There was a situation a couple of weeks ago with this Trump trial, one of many. This is not about Trump. I'm not a fan. I view the whole thing as a mess. I don't trust anyone out there that's in the public eye. But his defense lawyer had come up to the microphone after this judgment in against him, and she said that the defense material that she had prepared had been made inadmissible in this so-called court case. Now, I look at that and I go, well, then obviously the place where this communication event was taking place was not a court. And obviously there was not a judge there, because you can't, if they are breaking the internal rules of how you come to a view of truth, which is clearly what they're doing, then how can they be called a court? Yet where do we go? It's the hijacking of the process in so many cases that's the problem. They're controlling the court space. They control who goes on the jury. All of these things are literally gaming the system to such an extreme degree that the opportunities for truth to arise and come out of the mouth of anybody is less than 0%, it seems. No one. I can't actually defend myself.
It's
no,
rigged.
You can't. Yeah. You can't actually defend yourself, and we found you guilty. And in fact, you can't even speak. In fact, even for thinking that you could defend yourself, we're going to lock you up, because that's hate speech. It's just non-stop. It's mad. The whole thing has gone.
I'll tell you why this absolute rigid criminal behavior that we're seeing, we're not going to see an end of it until we actually force them out of it by force, because they are trying to turn a monetary debt of the world that is based on theft, mass murder, wars, and whatnot, into a moral debt that is based on pure lies. And the pure bottom, the foundational lie is this Holocaust. I mean, it's infantile, nonsensical. It's beyond belief that anybody with 3 functioning brain cells would fall for it. And yet that is what they have to do to rebrand the financial monetary debt that every country in this world is owing all kinds of money to these invisible banks, and turning that into a moral debt, because the Holocaust, you see. The world, of course, the human, our species, of course, will not allow that. It sort of runs. It's like an airplane that is on a flight trajectory straight into a mountain. We either take it off of its flight path in one way or the other, or we're all going to die. That model of turning the monetary debt of the world into a moral debt is our death. Not only for the white race, for all the races, for humanity, for our civilization. It's the end. So the motivation to get us out is just growing exponentially every single day. And that's where we're having more and more people from the other side saying, I don't want to be stuck with this criminal, this crime on my shoulders, speaking of the Jews, if you want to put it that way. They're all coming over to our side. I mean, people are saying that Israel is going to dissolve. How long is Netanyahu still going to be at the helm of that crime syndicate that he's running? This is the reality that we have to deal with, and it's huge, it's ugly, it's confusing, it's complicated, and yet that's why we need the best people now who are capable, who have potential to start coming out with nothing but the truth as their foundation. Nothing but the truth.
I think I agree with you. I just think it's a very delicate process, unfortunately, because it's been made that way, so that if you go all Sylvia Stoltz and get too robust and you get too vigorous with it, that's not going to be liked. You see, you can't. We don't want you doing anything. So we have to find a way of actually dealing with this, and I think part of it is this process of all these people have come into this space because of COVID. There's a huge glut that I've not seen before. I know 9/11 sparked an awful lot of people off. That was really in the early days of the internet, 2001. Many people had still not even got on the internet in 2001. I'd been on it for about 8 years with sort of dial-ups in little institutions and stuff like that. And I know it had taken off with modems, but this high-speed sort of social networking thing didn't exist back then, 23, 24 years ago. And 9/11 kicked an awful lot of intelligent people, journalists and the like, people like John Kaminsky, into a space that they didn't know existed, and suddenly a great deal of very strong work came out. And the process of people acquiring this habit of questioning things began to build up. What's occurred recently is huge numbers are now inquiring into things. And it's almost as if it sounds patronizing, I don't mean to, but some patience is required. I don't blame people for having their understandings of World War II that they have. Why would I? If you look at what they've been consuming, what they've been exposed to all of their life, why would they think anything else? I mean, we could say, well, why do you think something else? Because in your case, or my case, or maybe many people that are listening here, something happened to you, or you were your path was taking you into a certain place. You got into an uncomfortable position. I did. I got into a very uncomfortable position with the Bank of England 25 years ago. It was really bad. I didn't know what was going on. And that was like a very traumatic thing for me. Emotionally, it was. And I suddenly realized that I wasn't living at all on the planet I thought I lived on, that nothing that I'd thought that had been building for a few years, but that kind of hit me in the face full on, was what I thought it was. So that's just me. But we've got people who are young, who are coming into this thing, and there's a guiding challenge for everybody. How fast do you take someone before they pop a fuse? And I don't know. It's not as if I can control all that, but I'm very sensitive to it because I don't want to be counterproductive with people who are genuinely seeking the answers and might not be exactly on the same page that you and I and others are on. And there are other people further down the book who know way more than me about other things. But we've got to be kind to one another. I think it's very important.
I'll tell you what, a sort of a remedy for the problematic situation that you just described is that it has never been easier to pull people out of this indoctrinated mindset. First of all, the young people couldn't be indoctrinated with 60 years because they're not that old. I mean, like a 15-year-old and so forth. And the same model the same engineering that got us into the mindset of those evil Nazis. This business plan was so effective, so profitable for the eternal poisoners of the well, that they have expanded that to the entire white race. So before this point in time, a lot of the other white countries actually profited from the overthrow or the plundering of the Germans by this thing called Operation Paperclip and so forth, where all the ingenuity that had been come out of Germany was basically put up for grabs for all those who participated in the overthrow. Sort of like if you and your gang say, okay, you guys want to help us, we're going to overthrow this bank here, and everybody who helps in this overthrow of the bank gets part of the loot. So Operation Paperclip was a reward for those other European peoples to, hey, look at here's the booty, here's the bounty. So just shut your mouth and take the goods. But now all the other races have been put into this mindset of, oh, those evil whites, the whites are responsible for everything, even the climate, even this and everything. We are the guilty ones. So now we're all sort of, okay, if we're all the guilty ones now like the Germans were before, well, maybe the Germans actually were the ones who were trying to stop that horrible situation that we have now got to deal with. And we were just duped and fought on the wrong side. That changes everything. I mean, once you realize, hey, I've been helping the criminals, this never has it been easier to redeem the Germany's reputation, which was smeared and with lies and deceit, as now. So this, it's a game changer, and that's where we are. That's why it's such a good time to be alive now, is because it's never been easier to snap people out of their induced insane mode that they find themselves in as now. So that's what we're seeing. And I expect a lot's going to happen in this year, 2024.
Yes, it feels like it's a massive year already. I mean, it just does. There's all sorts of things taking place. The farmers we talked about. I mean, over in Kent, which is a county near me, the other day someone sent me a clip. A lot of tractors from farmers out on the road, and I mentioned to certain people that I want to get me a farmer on the show. I really do, to talk about this and to look at it, because it seems to me, in pragmatic terms, some kind of a what word should I use? A union. I hate these words, right? We have to get together with the British have to get together with the British farmers. The Dutch have to get together with the Dutch farmers. Same for the Germans and the French and the Italians. All of us have to stand by our farmers. And as a rallying call, it's perfect, because there is literally the only way you can think about what they're saying about food is that they're waging war on us, because they are. It's not a point of discussion. You look at this information, you go, these people are doing things and saying things that are directly going to harm the quality of our life. I mean, what's the ultimate end to their logic? It's this. It goes something like this. Look, life's very, very challenging, and we're going to protect you. And the best way to protect you so that you don't have to endure all the hardships of life is to kill you. You see, if you don't live, you'll never have to be in fear about things. So that's what we're going to do. Isn't that brilliant? That's kind of some kind of weird logic right in the base of all of these things. And logic's the wrong word too. They are driven by an agenda.
Business model. Good business model you just outlined, Paul. I mean, that is how it has come. And I totally get what you're saying about that we can have an understanding for people who, like, we once believed all the lies too, right? We were there.
Yes, we did.
We were there, and so there were other people who were ahead of us, and they could have been pretty judgmental of us for, being too stupid to see through the lies. But it's, these people who have done this to us, they had a very successful business model just in how they indoctrinated us. We were basically being kept fat and happy, you could say. I mean, I grew up 60s and 70s. Alfred too, he's just a few years older than me. And it was pretty much utopia. And we were always told that we are in the best country on all standards. We are in the best country on earth, Canada, mm-hmm. Right? And everything was just fantastic and beautiful and great. And we had total freedom of the press and freedom of speech. That's one of the things that made us such a great country. And, we have this thing called democracy, which is just the absolute best system.
Yay, democracy.
Because it's government for the people, by the people, of the people. And so, of course, that set us up to believe everything they taught us in school, because if you have all these freedoms, that means they must be telling us the truth. Why would we doubt them? Besides which, we have an innate very trusting nature. That is a built-in quality that we have that is actually a life-saving thing if you are not infiltrated by an enemy. Now, if you are infiltrated by an enemy which hides itself, it does not come to you with open, the cannon and the uniform at the gate, so to speak, and they declare war on you openly with their flag flying high. No, they sneak among you. They sneak into your dwellings and into your places of influence and power, and they sneakily do this over the years and over the decades, but we don't know it. We're not aware of it because we had everything. Everything was beautiful and, like I say, utopia, basically. So that's how they set us up for these absolutely unbelievable deceptions. Well, I say unbelievable. I mean, yeah. Okay, so that's the setup, That's
can I add to what you've just said, Monica? In this state of mind, not believing that we could have an enemy, the internal enemy that we couldn't see, the eternal poisoners of the wells, the self-chosenites. How did they thank the American people for bombing Germany back into the Stone Age
9/11.
in 1945 with a little 9/11?
Yeah.
Oh, how did they thank
USS Liberty?
USS Liberty.
Too.
The murder of, as John F. Kennedy was beginning to wake up, they had to take him out, kill him, and this put their man, Lyndon Baines Johnson, he was right in the pocket of these self-chosenites,
Yes.
and so he did their bidding.
Yeah, what you were just addressing there as well, Monica, I think this is time for a quote, so I've just dug it up. I'm going to read it out. You'll know it, but let's read it because it's very apt at this time. This is from Marcus Tullius Cicero, as we all know him. People will know this, but let's read it anyway. A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face and their arguments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to fear.
Thank you, Paul.
I think that nails it. Thank you, Mr. Cicero.
Yes, indeed. It does. It really does nail it perfectly. And, I just have another observation I'd like to add to this, just to give a little bit of kindness. That's what you said, Paul, to treat people with kindness. What I observe around me, and I still play music with a whole bunch of people around here, and I have lots of friends and acquaintances and whatnot, and some of them people who are still very much asleep. They are the nicest people, the most almost like angelic qualities about them. And
yes.
one of the reasons I think that they just can't believe that that it's possible that the government is doing something that is not for our good is because they cannot believe that there could be organized evil, like that there could be a group of people or just that anybody could be so evil that they would actually organize harm against us, because they themselves are such good people.
Yes.
It's our good-naturedness. I mean, these qualities have been just turned into weapons against us because we've become unsuspecting. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
We're very trusting, naive sort of people. We have to admit it. We are. In fact, it's a quality I don't want us to lose. It's where spontaneity comes from. It's where joy comes from. It's where real innocent beauty can arrive. It comes out of naivety. There's nothing wrong with it. But we also need that aspect strengthening again, I would say, the masculine role, which is to defend the village. And this is where it's been withering away as well. We could look at the so-called empowerment of women, which is a mystery to me, and now becoming clear, a mystery to most women who've fallen for that complete monstrosity. But of many of the things that have harmed us, that is right almost at the top of the list, because it's broken down the family connection, which defined masculinity, defined true, strong femininity, motherhood, all of these things which we as a people actually resonate with. In fact, the image for today's show is idyllic. It's from a 1950s advertising poster from the US, and it's a man and a woman, and you're very clear about which is which, and they're going to their idyllic house, and they have a little boy on a tricycle, and I loved it, actually. I didn't pick it this week, so thanks to the person who picked it. They know who they are. It's a wonderful picture. There's a little boy on a tricycle. And although I've sort of switched tack a bit here, I had a tricycle when I was a kid. I loved it. Seriously, I'm going, that's me. Great. And I loved it so much. I remember this. I had to go in for the day I got it, or the morning I got it, with my mum. And she said, you've got to come in for lunch now. I said, no, I'm staying with my bike. And I wouldn't come in. So they had to bring the tricycle into the kitchen so that I could sit next to it and look at it all the time.
So sweet.
Yeah, and then I had to put it in the hall. When I saw this, I went, oh, I remember that, because it was just fabulous. And we go to my grandma's, and we had to go up this hill at the end, and I was only little. My legs weren't strong enough at the time. I spent half my life on a bike after that, but when I was about 5 or 6, I just did, and there was a little rod that used to come out of the axle at the back so that my mum could push me up the hill. Talk about luxury. Fabulous. Anyway, sorry. It's got nothing to...
I want to just throw in something while it's fresh here, because we're talking about the role of men and women, and I just couldn't agree more, Paul. And when I was having some email debates, dialogues with I won't say who it is, but it's a relative, a younger guy.
Yeah.
And I realized with the things he said to me that, oh my goodness, he really is a victim of all this indoctrination. Because he said to me, Monica, I don't understand. Like, since you've learned all this stuff, or not since you've learned all this stuff, because he thinks we were full of, garbage, doo-doo. But since you've aligned yourself with all these strange folks, you seem to become anti-feminist, and you're the one who stands to lose. I'm so surprised by you, because you're kind of a strong woman, and used to be a park warden, which was kind of a man's career, really. And I'm so surprised by you, because you've become anti-feminist, which means you stand to lose. And I realized afterwards, wow, this young man, he was in his mid-20s at the time, he's been indoctrinated to feel, think, see, absorb that men and women are competing against each other, that we are not here to be complementary to each other with our different traits and qualities. And he really saw this. I mean, he just has no idea what he was talking about, really. Like, what is feminism? I mean, that is also a construct by the eternal well poisoners that has been foisted upon us, and
yes.
And it's been brought in like a Trojan horse, I have to say, because it all looked good. I mean, I'm a woman, and so I used to think, oh yeah, of course, equal pay, equal opportunity, equal this, equal that, da 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 da. They bring it in with all these nice things that, of course, as a woman, you would say, well, of course, that's only fair. But really, it's the Trojan horse, because what comes out of it is a destruction of the family. It's not to say that women should be, walked on or used as a doormat. No, it's just that our qualities are complementary to each other, and we are different from men, and we should celebrate
you don't say.
That.
Yeah, Monica, our enemy, the eternal poisoners of the wells, they induce us into a totally artificial condition. But to give you an idea, once we do come back to our natural condition, what kind of a response this is going to be, the biological response, I always like to call it the mama grizzly bear response. And I like to say that if you were doing on a hike in the woods somewhere, and you find the cutest little teddy bear on your path, and you don't even no bad intentions, you open up your knapsack, and you pull out a cookie, and you pick up the little teddy bear, and you start feeding him this cookie, and you pet him on behind the ears and so forth, and then Mama Grizzly Bear sees you. Well, you will not have any time to explain your good intentions to Mama Grizzly Bear. Mama Grizzly Bear will swat you to death before you can even take one more breath. That's the natural condition. The bear sees itself its offspring being threatened. Now, once we, the human race, we human beings, all understand that these vaccination COVID jabs were not for our health and well-being. They were a bioweapon to slowly kill us. Just like if somebody says, inhale this asbestos, it's not really for your health. It's to kill you. Then like this reaction will be accordingly. And everything that the eternal poisoners of the wells, these self-chosenites, are now doing to try to cover their crimes, cover their tracks, erase the evidence, is doing nothing other than setting the level of the response, basically. It's like if you try to explain to Mama Grizzly Bear anything, it doesn't make any difference. She does not understand your language. And when they And another thing is that as this thing is progressing and as we are decontaminating ourselves from this induced insanity, we can sense the lies just as well as a dog's nose can sense the track of a wounded animal, a freshly wounded animal. They just open their mouth and they are exposing themselves. And right now, the treasonous government that we have, the treasonous world government we have, is exposing itself with every word they utter. And those people who are not yet who thought it's not their business, they can go run a safer course by sticking their head in the sand. These people will not be taken seriously, and they will become traitors after a certain point, and will be swept away with a broom of fire. And that's it. Like this is the process. This is a biological response that's now happening, and that's wonderful, I say.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it takes all sorts of forms. It's definitely, people that think that men are in charge, that's one of the big mistakes. Nature is in charge and will not be mocked, is my view. And of course, many people subscribe to man-made laws. There's someone that was saying, if you find out whose law you follow, there's your God. And for most men, regrettably, it's other men, which is, of course, ridiculous, because as a man and as you live a bit and you get seasoned, you go, look, I can operate with these people up to a point, but I know that, greedy men, they're prone to their lusts, whatever they may be. And, of course, the lusts of these people are for more power and blah, 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 if they are, in fact, men at all. But, the idea of the complementary is a wonderful word, Monica. We are to complement one another. And I've mentioned here before, that were I placed in charge of things, which of course is not likely to happen, and probably many of the listeners here, if they were placed in charge, certainly for me, the family would be the absolute focal point of all policies made within a nation. You would define clearly what it is. For without families, there's no point any of us doing anything. There won't be a generation to carry on our story. Because it's a story. We are part of a long story where a current chapter is very messy, it's unsettling, it's challenging. It also holds out some incredible opportunities which probably most people can't yet see, including me. I just get glimpses of them every now and again. But we have to keep grinding away. If that's all you can do, then do that. People have to do things and keep active and stay focused and stay as buoyant as they can. And one way, of course, by doing it is by listening to things like the Brandenburg Concerto every now and again, because it fortifies the inner parts. You need it. You absolutely need it.
Absolutely. That was a wonderful little soliloquy. Is that what you call it?
Maybe, I guess.
Yeah, it's so true. So for people to not lose heart, not lose hope. Like you say, Paul, there are opportunities now. And Alfred always says that too. This is a wonderful time to be alive because we have opportunities right now to actually make what you do in your life a worthwhile life. And so, what to do. And like, we can't prescribe what each person does. Everybody can do something. One thing for sure, don't participate in their prescribed, this is safe and effective and it's for your safety and security and take this jab. No, don't participate because they're probably coming out with something, worse with their X or whatever, virus X that they're kind of rumoring about. And we must just not participate, not go along with that, and tribe up and get to know your neighbors at the farmers market and grow food and do things that make you more independent from the system, so to speak. And there's all kinds of things you can do in addition to, when we're alluding to everybody should do something about this war we are in, and it takes all kinds of different forms. I mean, you could create little leaflets and
Oh, you
go
can't, not over
leafleting.
here, Monica. You can't
Oh,
do
okay.
that.
No,
You
it's
can't
true.
do
They're
that.
making all kinds of laws here
I'm a,
too. It's true. I mean, online
yeah.
harms law that's now being tabled in Canada. We didn't even get to this. All these new blots of toner on paper things they call laws that are. I mean, every day they're coming out with more. It's absolutely ridiculous. But does that mean that we just roll over and just? I mean, we might as well just dig the hole for our grave.
Those laws are equivalent to the law that states you got to stick your finger up your ass at 12 o'clock every day. Do you obey that law? No. In fact, you
well, not every day. Not every day.
Blatantly.
Just on a leap year. Okay, so that was last week, but not every day. I think, it's just going back to when Roger Sales was on a few weeks ago. I think these are very interesting steps. If it is true, let us assume that it is, I'm just going to assume it's true, that you and I and everybody listening here have been inducted into a state of slavery unbeknownst to ourselves, courtesy of things such as birth certificates and the rest. These things are very important fields of study because they are revealing a lot of things, even though they need to, in my view, be communicated in a much more sort of brisk, fast way so that we can get on with it. But this may explain why they treat us in the way that they do. Like I was saying, if they viewed Sylvia Stoltz as one of their dogs that was barking a bit too much, they go, well, we own you, so we're just going to stick you in a box for a couple of years. Now, it appears there may be a way of disabusing of them of this notion that they have, which they say is proven, because there's certainly something bizarrely complex about the nature of the paperwork in your life, the way you're addressed, the way they seem like minute, silly points. Your name is always in capital letters. Well, it's not your name then. This is some kind of fictitious corporation against which they apply things. And I've mentioned here before that when I first got introduced into this field of looking at banking, I wasn't looking for it, but it came into my life in a big way. There was a day when we drove past a building that was a government building, and it was explained to me that this is where they gathered. This is 1996, I learnt this. They gathered in the birth certificates. The birth certificates go to the UK Treasury, and they would borrow money against the perceived tax revenue that little baby was going to contribute to the so-called economy for the duration of its life. In other words, your life is put up as surety for a loan, and they say, well, we own you. You're our asset because we've got a birth certificate and you registered, which means the king owns you or the crown owns you. So this scheme that they've had, and people say, well, it's absolutely amazing. From a certain perspective, yes, but you see, we're not thinking about trying to rob and plunder our fellow human beings. It's not amazing. It's sick. It's absolutely detestable. It's godless. It is literally satanic. It's against the actual laws that we naturally operate under from birth instinctively, that are in our guts, which is and it's this instinct that's part and parcel of a backdrop to this show and other shows, and the comments that are coming up as well in the thing. We sense rightly and strongly that things are not in our favour, and I accept we don't have a voice here in England. We haven't got one. The English haven't had a voice in English affairs for centuries, really. A lot of drama going on, but when push comes to shove and you get down to the final sentences, it's always the same decision. No, you don't get what you want. We got what we want. We're in charge. And that's the thing that we're kind of bashing into. There's some people doing brilliant work on this and finding ways, I think, of simplifying it and bringing it to ever larger numbers, ever more speedily. Well, I think it's worthwhile doing. I can't guarantee that anything is going to be the magic bullet that changes it all. But whatever area lights your candle, get to it. Start working. It's good. It's good work. We're working for the goodness, and we should really get stuck in even more, which many people are, of course.
Wonderful. Yes, like you say, we're not, whatever lights your candle, get to work. Yeah. I like that.
I'll tell you what lights Alfred's candle. It seems he's probably sat there thinking, I'm never going to play this because we've only got about 6 minutes left on the official broadcast, but I'm going to play this. So this is courtesy of Alfred, 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Here we go. So, Alfred, why that piece of brilliant bagpipe music?
Because I've often dreamt of having a whole bagpipe crew going from north to south in our cities and cleaning out everything that doesn't really belong there, you know. And when I hear that music, it just energizes and makes me happy, and I don't know, just gets me going.
Me too. What is it about bagpipes? They're amazing, you know. And I think when we were talking pre-show, I'd mentioned that was the sound that brought down the walls of Jericho. In my view, you might not agree, listeners out there, but this is an ancient instrument, and it's a battle instrument of our people. And of course, it's all round the periphery of Europe. The Spanish have got their own version of bagpipes. If you look it up, you get all these different variations of them. But of course, the Scots military and their use of bagpipes is legendary, and of course, it resonates. It's the most fantastic sound. My mum hated the bagpipes, and she loved music. And I go, why don't you like it? Oh, no, it's such a dirge. I hate that droning. I said, I love the drone. The drone's the key bit. Loved it. Fabulous, fabulous bit of music.
It lights my fire, too. Love it. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're just about near the end of the actual broadcast. I'll just put the other music on in the background now as we just slowly wind down. I'll keep this down in volume. There you go. That's the little... So we're just about wrapped up here on WBN 324 for our official broadcast here on Radio Time. The show will probably go on, as it often does. It seems to be habitual now, on Rumble. So if you want to carry on in the chat, we'll be talking probably a little bit more there, I think. But my guests this week have been the wonderful Monica and Alfred Schaeffer. Thank you both very much for turning up. And we'll definitely have you back on again soon. That's the royal we, by the way. And I'll be here again with the show next week. Same time, 3 p.m. US Eastern, 8 p.m. in the UK for another couple of hours of fun, jollity, and really happy news. But a brilliant show. Wonderful hearing all of your exploits and really catching up to speed on all this kind of stuff. So thank you both very much.
Thank you for
Paul.
having us, Paul. Thank you.
And I'll give you a shout out when we're clear, which is imminently. See you all next week, everybody. Bye for now.